offer? And it's like, well, maybe the only thing that I have to offer right now that's meaningful are these videos. So like that was a part of it. There's nothing sexy about that from my perspective then. And I just share that with you to sort of counter the fact that like, you know, you say, what advice would I give to people? It's like, no, I'm not some genius that came up with this idea. Like a lot of it was just pieces falling into place. And there was a lot of sort of soft underbelly to it that was not glamorous or exciting or sexy, but it was actually like pretty scary and, you know, motivated by insecurities and things like that.
What were some of those scary moments with Beam?
I mean, look, like financially, it was really scary. Really scary. You know, like the last couple months, like I took no salary and paid for most things out of pocket until we raised our first real round of financing. Like that initial $400,000, I say $500,000, I think it was $450,000. That was enough to hire a team, but I wasn't paying myself then. I also had no income, so I was using credit cards and stuff like that. It was really scary financially. And then the other side of it, after we had raised $4 million, 2 years later, the money was drying up very, very quickly. And I remember like cutting my salary in half. The most salary I ever paid myself was after we raised $4 million. I paid myself $200,000
annually.
Yeah, and annually. And I remember that lasted for like 6 months. And then I was like, cut it down to $100,000. And then like 3 weeks later, I was like, kill my salary completely. Like, give me no salary. So you're just doing the math. You know, like if I keep, like that money could be going to one of my employees and, you know, it's my responsibility that they get paid. It's no one's responsibility that I get paid. Those moments were really scary. But, you know, then YouTube AdSense turned on.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, when you're doing 600,000 or 700,000 views a month and AdSense is like negligible, you know, it's in the tens or hundreds of dollars, and then that spikes and all of a sudden it's tens of thousands of dollars a month. It's like I had a real income stream from the vlog that I was able to like aim that hose of money at all this crazy, terrifying debt that I had accrued to start this company. So that was like, you know, that gave me like, that became a motivator. And it was like, it felt like something was working because of that.
When it comes to brand deals, you have a way of saying F you to sponsors and making something even better for them that they end up liking. Like 2 videos that come to mind that I've watched of yours, Casey, is the video you made for Fox Studios for Walter Mitty. Like where you took the budget for that sponsorship and you're like, you know what? I'm not gonna make a promotion for the movie Walter Mitty. I'm gonna go on a trip to the Philippines and donate it to those in need. How do you go about doing that? And there's another example I want to talk about, but like I find so many creators are like, when we're talking with brands, they're like, here are the talking points, here's the product, like do this, do that. And the creative doesn't get as many views, it doesn't perform as well, but you've been able to, again, like politely and strategically kind of say F you, I want to do this.
For starters, I never ever say F you.
Or, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
but
maybe metaphorically, but
yeah.
Mostly it's a combination of one, demonstrating that you can actually make something better. And you have to show that. That's about actions, not about words. And then I think it's about having some sort of historical precedent for it. You know, like before I ever was able to talk, like, you know, the example that I know you want to get to, because it's a bigger story, there's a lot more to talk about, but like make it count for Nike.
Yeah.
I think what's underappreciated about that video is I had a deal with Nike to make 3 videos for the Fuel Band. And the first 2 videos had significantly more emphasis and significantly more budget. And when it came time to make the 3rd video, I called up Alex Lopez at Nike and I was like, look, I want to do this differently. I want to do something that's way off the books and way different from what we initially scripted. I won't spend any more money, but I think I can make something much better. And then he was like, okay, just like don't screw me over, don't leave me in the lurch, but if you want to run wild with the creative, go for it. And I had earned that because I delivered 2 videos. I didn't say, hey man, go fuck yourself, I'm taking off with the money. I was like, I'm gonna do this. And I remember showing him the video and he was like, I don't know what this is, but I know it's good. And
for people who don't know, to give context, the video is you took the money and you just went on a trip with your buddy and you documented yourself running.
Sure,
across
because the
screen.
name of the video and the tagline for the product was "Make It Count." And it was about like making every day count. And this is before inspo porn was a word, and we really did it. It wasn't sort of a quasi Instagram inspiration. Like it was a real adventure that like two guys that were in their 20s, like two friends. So I think it's like there's a romance in the sort of Herzogian way of characterizing it as like, fuck the man, take the money and run. And the reality is it's something much more thoughtful. And it's like, I recently had a brand deal that didn't work out. I made the video for the client and they were like, we need you to change this, this, and this, and put in these talking points. And I just, plainly was like, no, I'm not going to do any of that. And I said to them, I was like, why did you hire me? Like I have 1,200 videos online and in none of them do I have a voiceover where I'm talking about the nuances of a product. Like I've never done that. Who did you think you were hiring? And I wasn't saying that in a punitive manner. I was saying that in a genuine, I'm not asking rhetorically. Like if what you wanted were numbers and an explicit product endorsement, there are so many creators that have a reputation that can do that will be more accurately and fairly communicated. I don't do that. So I'm not a good fit for that. You don't hire a tennis player to, be a running back. And, all of that is kind of earned. Like you have to get there. So there's the Hunter Thompson rebel of it all, that spirit is alive and well, but behind that is something that's much more considered and thoughtful. And at the end of the day, always try to deliver. The Walter Mitty video was like, they were nervous, but they gave me the green light before I did that. And they were really excited about it. And Ben Stiller loved it. And I think it really communicated a message that he certainly was in parallel to what he was communicating with his script and with his movie. So it wasn't such a gross digression. It was just also done at a time when that was way outside of the box of thinking. It was pretty radical. But it was something I knew that I could do well. One last caveat I'll add to that is like, the irony of it is when I was a traditional TV commercial director, I was not good. I remember like being hired by ESPN to make a commercial for BMX bikes. Purely mediocre. I made like a shaving commercial for Gillette, totally average. I wasn't good at that. And they were hiring me because my YouTube videos were good. I was not a good commercial director. So eventually I got to the place where it's like, look, just let me make my YouTube videos for you. And we can make something good together. So, it's like everything else, it's like, earn it.
Are there other early examples? I think, like you said, like once you have a precedent, you could point to that. You could, talk to Fox Studios and be like, hey, for this video for Walter Mitty, look what I did for Nike. I want to take.
I think the best example is Nike, because before I was ever paid a cent from Nike, I made fake Nike commercials. You just type in Nike swoosh into Google, and then you right-click save the swoosh, and then you make a commercial, and you put that at the end. And I did that. It was just like, if you remember way back in the day, there was a whole bunch of money poured into something called the Truth Campaign, and it was an anti-cigarette smoking campaign. I always wanted to do a commercial for them because they were so good. So we just made a bunch. Like we made one where we had a cigarette, and it was like slowly burning down, and like the ashes went flaccid. And as the ashes finally like went fully limp, it was like, cigarette smoking causes erectile dysfunction. Truth. They never paid us for that. We just did it. But I did that enough that like this amazing guy named Julian Kahn was like, hey, I love these fake Nike commercials. I'm hosting an event for Nike in the East Village. Do you want to come? Will you make us a video? And I was like, totally. And he was like, okay, I only have a budget of a couple $100. And I was like, great. And I made a video about biking in the city, and I put Nike's logo at the end. Now he had paid me, and the money came from Nike. So technically that made me someone who had made a Nike commercial. I wasn't legit at all, but I drew that. And then I told everybody on planet Earth that I directed Nike commercials. And like there was an indirect, but there was a line between that to then have a Nike call. So like in the most, pseudo-inspirational fucking bullshit podcasting terms, it's like, if you want something, manifest it. But that's what that looks like. That's what manifesting something looks like, is if you're not willing to do the work without getting paid 100 times, then chances are you're never going to find the opportunity to do the work and get paid for it. And that's how I was able to, get the thumbs up to make it count. That's how I was able to get the thumbs up to make the Mercedes campaign or the Walter Mitty campaign. It's because I did it 100 times and then another 100 times.
Are there other examples of things you did unpaid that ultimately got paid a lot for?
Sure. I mean, our HBO show. Our HBO show was, there was an early show. I'm looking around my office because somewhere in here maybe I moved them. We had the original invite we made a show for cable access called Neistat Brothers. And it was absurd. It was absurd. This was like 2003. It was absurd. But the guy that owned the cable news, the public access channel, was like, I really like your stuff. Let's do something together. A wonderful man named Tom Scott, who I remain friends with to this day. And I was like, how about we make that show? And he's like, okay. And he was like, let me know how much money you need. And Van and I did some back of the napkin math, and we're like, we need $20,000 a month because there's two of us. That's $10,000 a month each, but we also have the studio, and then we have to pay taxes. So it was like the most middle class amount of money you could ask for that accounted zero for the budget to make a video. And he agreed to that. So we knew for a year we'd have like $20,000 a month coming in for the whole year. It's a huge deal. I've never had recurring income. And that's when we made the HBO show. And we poured everything we had into that. And we could barely make rent that whole year. And we were making it for this guy, and we didn't have a plan for it. We're like, well, is this going to go on cable access? What do we do with this? And then that's the show we ended up selling for $2 million. And it says at the beginning of that show, an HBO production. It was not. It was like two knucklehead brothers and a very benevolent, visionary guy who was willing to write a check.
But then HBO picked up on it.
And then HBO bought it.
Where did you put it out first for them to see it? Or did you guys film a pilot?
No,
and
we
pitch
showed it
them?
to smart people that we didn't know. We don't know any smart people, but Tom Scott, the guy who bankrolled it, he was like, I have friends. I went to college with Doug Liman, made the movie Swingers. That was like my favorite movie. It's still one of my favorite. I was like, no way. And he was like, I want to show it to him. And he came by, and I remember he watched it, and all he said was, this is good. And then he left, and I was like, what the fuck does that mean? And then he told some people, and they came by, and they're like, oh, we like this. And he showed this very famous producer who produced another one of my favorite movies. Her name was Christine Michon. She produced the movie Kids. Have you seen Kids? Yep. Hard to find that movie. And she was like, this is great. I think I can help get this out there. And we brought her on as a producer. So the idea that I'm working with a hero of mine, just because she believed in the work that she saw, and she was the one who brought it into HBO. I remember she called us, and she's like, HBO likes this. And we're like, what does that mean? And then, and that's how it happened.
In a recent video, your brother Van talked about why that HBO show ended. He said, quote, he realized that half the job of an artist is to make the work and the other half is to get the work out into the world. And he talked about how he thought Van was the artist, and he was like, oh, Casey was, quote, to sell his wares, to kind of be the agent, the art dealer, handle the business side. Can you tell me about that? Because I was actually surprised to hear there's that division of labor where you're handling the business side, where you're now such a celebrated creative and artist and don't take meetings and what do you...
Look, that video that Van made is a tremendous movie. Van, by the way, is my favorite YouTuber. I think he's the best YouTuber I've ever seen. When it comes to creativity, I've never seen someone like him, and he's always been sort of an idol of mine creatively. But I remember when he started YouTube, we spent a lot of time together, and I tried to share with him everything I knew about YouTube, but I never could have foreseen then that he would have 4 years and however many dozens or hundreds of videos he's made with such consistency, and they're all excellent. He is my favorite. To me, he is truly unique in his creative output on YouTube.
He is. Yeah.
But the context of that video where he said that's how he perceived things then. And it was a very, contentious time for us.
Whereas Casey was always on the hustle, on the phone, taking meetings, I was inclined to smoke pot all day, immerse myself into this project or that.
And how I characterize it is it's like When you have nothing, everything's easy. But when you have something, things get really hard. And all of a sudden, Van and I found ourselves to be very successful. So in that, in that position, Van was like, no, I want to be the artist. That's all I want to do. I don't want to handle any of the business. And it meant like, okay, well, that means I have to handle all of the business. And that is just it's an absolutely combustible dynamic that was, it was irreconcilable to have a business partnership around creativity where roles all of a sudden shifted so dramatically. And, I think it definitely precipitated very quickly when we didn't make a second season for the HBO show. But it was, it was complicated. It was really complicated. And regarding the specifics of like business, I think that I'm 51% like a business guy and 49% like a creative guy.
Really? Wow.
For sure.
Tell me more.
Well, I mean, I think like unrewarded talent is, as common as, the wind. I think that unrewarded talent is everywhere. I think talent's overrated. I think talent is the least of your problems. I think you can have zero talent and be wildly successful. But almost invariably, talent alone does not guarantee success. And I've always been interested in not just the business of it, but business. I enjoy it. It's exciting for me. For me, there's great artistry and creativity in how you approach business. And I think when you look at some of the truly great business leaders, like I don't draw more inspiration from Quentin Tarantino than I do from Steve Jobs. I think that they just had, their craft is different. Steve Jobs' craft is business, and Quentin Tarantino's is film. So for me, there's a real conflation between the two. And when it comes to what excites me, building a technology company and trying to figure out how to make this work, raising capital was just as exciting as making a great movie. And when I was young and trying to figure things out and we had nothing, it was just as exciting for me to figure out how to get in front of the brand. Like when you direct TV commercials, they like get a bunch of treatments from a bunch of directors, and then they have to pick like which director do we want to work with, and then they like narrow it down to 5, and then they meet with each of the 5. And when they picked me as one of the 5, and it was always me and Van, oh man, would I get fired up? I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna fucking crush this meeting. I'm gonna go in there and tear this meeting to pieces. And I loved the business of it, and that's always been true. And I think in the shadow of HBO, Van really discovered that the business of it wasn't exciting for him at all. And that, so that's a challenging thing.
And the only reason I had that reaction when you said like the breakdown of 51% business, 49% creative is I've heard these stories during your vlog days where like you almost declined a meeting with Jeffrey Katzenberg, like one of the biggest like business guys in Hollywood, like, do a lot for any creator's career. Like, how did you think about the opportunities that were coming in as you were making vlogs, like that decision? Because it feels like the right business thing to do is like take that meeting and see if you could find other
very specifically then when I was doing the daily vlog, I had a no meeting rule. And like that Jeffrey Katzenberg story is my agent calls me. He's like, Jeffrey Katzenberg wants to meet with you. And I was like, yeah, no thanks. I'm not taking meetings. And he's like, no, Casey, he wants a meeting with you. And it's Jeffrey Katzenberg. And I was like, and we like fought, and he talked to me. And I remember meeting him at like, this is the fanciest restaurant I've ever been in to this day, and sitting down. And I sit down with Katzenberg, and I was like, how much time do you have? And he was like, I've got time. And I just started going. And he's like,
he said to you?
Yes,
said to him?
He said to me, and he was like, Casey, slow down. Like that's what Katzenberg said to me in the one time I've interacted with the guy. But I realized very quickly in the daily vlog that one, it took 100% of my focus. My days were always sort of split. I had to focus on my family when I was at home, and then I had to give my business some very legitimate time. And then I had to make a video. There was nothing left. There was nothing. So the idea that I'm gonna sit down for an hour and give real focus to a meeting with anyone, no, it doesn't make any sense. And on top of that, when you know your video that you're posting every day is gonna do 1 million views, so you're telling me giving all of my attention to one person is of greater value than me giving my attention to 1 million people? And I'm like, no, like making videos is my only priority. I think I said that to you like 8 times today, by the way, until I realized that you were sitting outside of my building. And I was like, my God, why did you tell me you were outside?
Oh, I don't want to.
I thought you were like in a studio chilling. Like I had no idea. I'm so sorry and embarrassed about that. But
No.
because I don't need to post today.
Yeah.
I haven't posted a video in 8 months. There's no fire. There's no rush.
Are there other big opportunities you said no to during those vlog days?
Yeah.
What were some of the biggest
I don't
opportunities you
remember.
said no to?
It was blanket no. Everything was a no.
Even if there could have been a moment,
If it
like,
required a meeting, the answer was no.
were there any deals that came in or brand deals that you're like,
Yeah, most.
during those vlog days or even now, like, would you lean more towards saying no to a brand to
Now
get
I
the video out?
I almost only say no. But back then it was, when I'm posting 30 videos a month, it's very easy to say yes.
Right.
Because it's easy to incorporate. And I brand deals, I think, if you're ever a creator and you're lucky enough to be offered a brand deal, it is an extraordinary opportunity. And do your best. And do your best for that brand. Give it everything you've got. Because it's as long as you work hard at it, it is a fantastically equitable opportunity. And I think if you really do it right, that the audience is receptive and appreciative, and if you got a good audience, they're going to appreciate the fact that you figured out how to earn off of your hard work. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. But I post infrequently now, and if I post 10 videos a year, I'm happy to have 4 of them have a brand deal in it. But I get a little insecure when I only post branded videos, even though I still work really hard on them. So that I'm sensitive to. And, as that sensitivity increases, as does my scrutiny of who I'm going to do a brand deal with. Again, when I was doing it daily, it was like, as long as it's not a conflict or it's something that I don't believe in, like I'm not going to do a TV commercial for like, who's evil, like, Exxon, like I'm not going to do a commercial for them. Like I'm not going to do a commercial for like a cigarette company. Smoke cigarettes, kids, they're great. But as long as it's a legitimate company and they're not pushy about what it's for, great. Great. If you have an opportunity to make a living, you make that living. But I'm just not in that position now, and I'm insecure about that. So I say no a lot.
You have a ton of brands reaching out. Like, take me into your inbox. Like, what gets a yes from Casey Neistat?
I'm old now, and I have a degree of financial security. I've done really well, but I also live like, I know what my monthly overhead is, and it's pretty set. I rent an apartment in New York, which is great, a really nice apartment. My kids go to school, we have groceries and a babysitter and a car and insurance and stuff like that, but I don't fly in private jets. I have. It's awesome. If you ever get invited on a private jet, say yes. So I don't buy fancy stuff. My wife buys my clothes. I buy my underwear off Amazon. Like I don't, when I first had money, like when I first time in my life made a lot of money, or I sold my company, and I was like, oh shit. I did crazy things and it was exciting, but then you realize like, I'm getting such little value from this. Like I spent a lot of money on that and it didn't bring me any sense of fulfillment. And now it's like, well, the thing that makes me the happiest is spending time with my kids and being alone in my office and things like that. And the irony of that is the way to get more of that is not by doing things that make you money, but it's actually saying no to the things that make you money. So it's a very privileged, very amazing place to be.
You have this quote that just has always stuck with me. You often say ideas are overrated, and you said, a great idea can make for a garbage movie, and a garbage idea can make for a great movie, which honestly goes nearly against everything I've heard in most of my interviews with creators, especially Mr. Beast, who says, ideas are everything. I'm curious, where does that perspective come from?
Have you ever seen Vinnie Gallo's Buffalo 66?
No.
I think it's one of the greatest films in history. I think it's regarded as one of the best films. And that movie, the story goes, the lore goes, that he made that movie because somebody bet him he couldn't make a movie about having to take a piss. And it's like, it's a phenomenal movie that had a huge impact on my own career. But I think that I think that ideas are easy. Like, here's an idea, like, make a movie about sharks swimming around Cape Cod. It's a shitty idea, but like Jaws invented the blockbuster. It's one of the greatest movies ever made. So it's not about discounting what's at the core of the narrative, but it's purely about the execution. I mean, you bring up Mr. Beast.
Yeah.
Here's a terrible idea. Let's make a red circle and see who can stand in it the longest. That movie has what, like 200 million views? I've watched that movie. I've watched that YouTube video. It's great. And it's great because of Mr. Beast's execution, because of Jimmy's, like, the way it was captured and the focus on characters, and because it's fun. And I don't think it's, the idea is particularly novel. I think it always comes down to the execution.
Yeah, I wanted to break down a few of your videos. I wouldn't say these are garbage ideas, but they're ideas that I think are ones that people would pass by in everyday life. Millions of people get tickets in New York City, but you famously turned a ticket that you got on a bike ride into a video that got 30 million views. And I just want to show you that video and ask you a few questions.
Does that video have 30 million views?
Yes.
Huh. I know this video. I know this video frame for frame.
I know. I want to ask you about a few of those frames.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lay it on me.
I'm getting a ticket for riding my bike not in the bike lane. Can't believe you're busting my balls. I'm doing the world a favor riding my bike. It's pouring rain out.
So I didn't have a camera on me, and I was holding my phone like this. And this is the iPhone 5. My thumb was over the microphone. When I was interviewing, when I was asking that cop, when I was giving that officer a hard time. But I was always frustrated at how muffled the audio was, because it's such like an amazing little moment.
Yeah.
By the way, just sort of parenthetically, and I know this isn't your line of questioning about this video, but this officer and I became good friends. Good might be a stretch. Like, we don't go to dinner at each other's houses, but like, I have seen him multiple times since this happened, and he's a great guy. And I gave him a hard time in the video, and like, but we run into each other every once in a while. We say hi. One time I was out of town and my wife sent me a selfie, and it was her and this officer. So yeah, that's one of my favorite parts of that video.
When you're experiencing that moment, you're getting a ticket from the officer, is like your brain saying, I'm going to turn this into a video?
I mean, it's interesting you picked that video, because that video, I was a very different person then. I was like a kid in my 20s. I was much less considered than I am now. I was like a 43-year-old married father of 3. I was like a much more reckless then. But no, I thought, like, in the moment, like, it was preposterous that he was writing me that ticket. And the ridiculousness of it is revealed by the fact that he never got out of his car. And I always thought, and I've asked him this, I've always thought that he pulled me over because he didn't want to get out of his car. It's pouring rain out, and he knew that I would stop, and he never had to get out of his car. So no, in that moment I was just like, are you kidding me? I have to stand here in the pouring rain. And on top of that, the ticket that he gave me, it turns out, was not legitimate. You can't ticket someone for what he gave me a ticket for. So no, in the moment I was just flustered.
So I got a ticket for not riding in the bike lane, but often there are obstructions that keep you from properly riding.
Before we get to the crescendo, there's an echo in my voice because I didn't know how to use audio. So my buddy Oscar is holding the point and shoot camera like this. This is like a Canon 8700, really low quality camera. And I knew the audio wouldn't get me. So I had a voice recorder, like one that like a journalist would be like, Mr. President, what do you think about the tax policy? I had that in my pocket with a little microphone that was like $7, ran up to my lapel. And I didn't know how to, I still don't, because I don't use lavs. I didn't know how to sync the audio. And I never got it perfect. In any event, I'll rewind so we can show me crash. Okay.
But often there are obstructions that keep you from properly riding in the bike lane.
You should know, I hate watching my own videos.
That's why I want you to watch them, and hearing you roasted is fascinating.
Yeah.
Why, like, how did you decide, like, after that moment to take the video into this direction?
So I captured like the getting the ticket.
Yeah.
And it wasn't this moment that motivated me to make a video about it. I'd had that video this was after I had filmed my HBO series. And what my HBO series was the production of it was my big brother Van and I, for a year, we would sort of like always be seeking interestingness in our own lives and then turning that interestingness into little stories. So for that year, we always had cameras on us. Sometimes it was a DV camera with an actual tape in it. Sometimes it was a point and shoot. We always had cameras around, and we're always like squeezing the interestingness out of our lives to tell stories. And it definitely shifts your brain in a way that would be much more dramatic when I ended up making my daily YouTube series. But it gets you to that place. So when something happens, instinctually, I would take a camera out. And it seems silly to say that now because everybody films everything now. But this was like, you probably know better than me, but I think this video was 15 years ago, 16 years ago. It wasn't the case then. So I filmed the cop because, I don't know, it seemed interesting. And then when I thought I had a movie here, there was a movie to be made, was when NPR was doing a story about bike lanes, and I called in, and they answered. I'd never been on the radio before. And I remember putting my camera in front of my FM radio so I could hear myself and have that for posterity. And that went off so well. Like the on-air interaction was so funny when he's like, the official guy for giving me legal advice on the radio was like, you can't get a ticket for riding outside the bike lane.
Maybe that's later in the video.
That's not a breach. And when he said that was when I was like, oh man, that's such a cool thing to build a little narrative around.
As you've been hearing on our show and elsewhere, the police continue to crack down on biking infractions. As the number of bikers explodes throughout the city, ticketing is on the rise. Casey in Manhattan, you got a ticket this month?
Yeah, I got a ticket about 3 weeks ago for riding my bike not in the bike lane.
Not in the bike lane. Alex is holding up a sign that says, you could have just said it.
Oh, okay.
His sign says, not illegal.
Yeah.
So it was that moment when I was like, oh my God, this is too funny. Because I knew that cop was like just giving me a hard time.
Yeah.
And that's when I knew that there was a video. And then it was just like, I needed something punchy. So Oscar and I went out and I was like, let's just film me showing why, to this day, I don't go near bike lanes. I think bike lanes, for me, are so much more dangerous, way more of a liability. I have no problem navigating the streets with taxis, but being confined to a little bike lane with like some out-of-town 110-pound girl from Oklahoma on like a 45-pound city bike with a motor in it, I don't want to be trapped in there with her. Like, let me, put me out there with the animals behind the taxi cabs and Ubers. But the final shot when I crashed into a cop car,
yeah, it was epic.
It was the only shot we went back out to get. Like Oscar and I shot all these shots, and we knew it was going to be a good video because it was just funny watching it back because I really sold the falls, especially like when I jumped into the back of the van or like crashed over a taxi cab. But I was like, we need to have me hitting a cop car at the end. And it took us like 5 hours of riding around the city to find a cop car parked in the bike lane. And this police car is parked in front of a police station. So I was like, Oscar, you have one chance to get this shot. Like, I'm not doing this again. I was like, I already have a ticket for this video. I can't get arrested for this video. But it worked out. It was a funny video.
Casey, how do you turn like something ordinary or like quote unquote non-interesting into something more interesting? Like if we were to go on the street, we were before this, like, trying to shoot a few photos for your thumbnail or going around town. Like I bet if we ran into people like, drilling or doing construction or making noise or people selling like counterfeit bags, like you could find more of a story there than the average person who passes by. Like, do you have thoughts on how like a YouTuber who can take something uninteresting and make it more interesting for a video?
I think that's a tough question because it's all it's in the perspective of the person behind the camera. But I think of a movie like KovaaKsChattingThinDeserteagle, which has not one line of dialogue in it. I don't think there's one human in that movie, and it's fascinating.
Can you give context for people who don't know that movie?
KovaaKsChattingThinDeserteagle is a movie that was made maybe in the late 70s, early 80s. Philip Glass did the score, and it's basically shots of the planet Earth. So it'll be shots of like big cityscapes, big mountain shots. And it's much more than just sort of a montage of the world. There is very much so a narrative revealed in there about maybe humanity or like the duality of man and earth or something like that. Like there's real depth to it. And it has everything to do with the way that it was captured and shared. And I think if you start to pull apart any movie that you're a fan of, you see moments in there like, why the long sort of boring shots that you see in Lawrence of Arabia, like that's a shot about a desert. Like, why is a guy riding a camel interesting? And it's like, well, maybe it's not, but this shot is fascinating. Some greatest cinematography in the history of cinema in that movie. So, for me, it's like, I remember, I think I did for like a few weeks in Los Angeles, I made like really short videos every day for like a couple months or a month. And one day I woke up and I was like, I wonder like, I want to make a movie today about the most boring thing. And I made a video about a soap dish. And I think it's one of my favorite videos, although I haven't watched it back since I posted it. But I just remember making it and like how hard it was to try to pretend that I was naked because I was in the shower. But like I couldn't be naked because I have a rule, which is like, even when you're trying to pretend to be naked, you never know if like the reflection of the shower not. So always have on shorts. So I'm like soaking wet, trying to work with my cameras that keep fogging up to make this like ridiculous video about a soap dish. And in the end, I don't know if anybody liked it, but for me, I thought it was great. I had so much fun making it. I thought the video was so fun. So maybe not everybody loves the craft, but for me, that's what excites me the most is the craft. So it really marginalizes the need for a super compelling story.